Some dogs don't just see the world, they listen to what it's trying to hide. The first night Ethan Cole stepped into room 12, he noticed how quiet it was, not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that seemed to press against your ears like a held breath. The air inside the small roadside motel felt stale, carrying a faint scent of old wood and something colder beneath it, something that didn't quite belong. He dropped his worn duffel bag beside the bed, the floorboards creaking softly under his boots, each step echoing just a fraction too long, like the room was remembering him before he had even arrived. Rex followed close behind, his large paws silent against the floor, amber eyes scanning the corners with a focus Ethan had learned not to question. Outside, a lone streetlight flickered, casting thin stripes of pale light through the cracked blinds, stretching across the room like bars. Ethan exhaled slowly, rolling tension out of his shoulders the way he used to after long days in uniform. Except now there was no command waiting, no orders, just the long stretch of silence he had carried home with him. He sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress sagging under his weight, springs whispering beneath the thin fabric. Rex didn't settle like he usually did. Instead, he stood still, just a few feet away, his gaze fixed on the darkness beneath the bed, unmoving, unblinking. Ethan noticed it right away. Rex wasn't curious, he wasn't cautious, he was certain. The kind of certainty that had once saved lives in places Ethan didn't talk about anymore. "What is it, boy?" he murmured, his voice low, more out of habit than expectation. Rex didn't respond, didn't wag his tail, didn't shift his stance. He simply stared, his ears slightly forward, his breathing steady but deeper than usual, as if he was listening to something far below the surface. Ethan leaned back slightly, trying to catch whatever had his dog's attention, but there was nothing, just shadows layered over shadows, the faint outline of the bed frame, and darkness pooling beneath it. He shook his head, forcing a small, tired smile. "Probably just a mouse," he said quietly, though even to his own ears it didn't sound convincing. Rex took one slow step forward, then another, lowering his head just enough that his nose hovered inches above the floor. He didn't sniff wildly like he would with a scent. Instead, he paused, completely still, as if waiting for something to answer him. The room seemed to tighten around them, the hum of the old air conditioner clicking off without warning, leaving behind a silence so complete Ethan could hear his own heartbeat settling into the space. Rex let out a low, almost inaudible breath, not a growl, not fear, but recognition, something deep and instinctive, something Ethan had only seen a handful of times before, and never without reason. Ethan's expression shifted, the fatigue in his eyes sharpening into something more alert, more focused. The past had taught him many things, but one lesson had never faded. When Rex locked onto something like this, you paid attention. Slowly, Ethan leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees, his gaze following the exact line of his dog's focus, into the still, waiting darkness beneath the bed. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world outside faded into nothing. No passing cars, no distant voices, just the quiet weight of that small room and whatever it was holding just out of sight. Ethan swallowed lightly, the air feeling colder now, thinner, like something had shifted without making a sound. Rex didn't blink, didn't back away. And somehow, that was what unsettled Ethan the most, because this wasn't curiosity, and it wasn't confusion. It was certainty, and the kind of certainty that doesn't come from guessing, but from knowing. And in that moment, Ethan realized something he couldn't quite explain. Rex wasn't waiting to discover something. He was waiting for Ethan to notice it too. The silence did not break, it deepened, settling into the corners of the room like something patient and unseen. Ethan shifted slightly on the edge of the bed, the old wood beneath him letting out a soft, uneven creak that seemed louder than it should have been. Rex did not react to the sound. His focus remained locked beneath the frame, unwavering, as if the noise belonged to a different world entirely. Ethan leaned forward a little more, lowering his head just enough to try and catch a better angle. The darkness under the bed did not look empty anymore. It looked layered, like something rested beyond what the eye could immediately understand. He reached down slowly, his fingers brushing against the worn carpet. The fabric felt colder than the rest of the room. Not damp, not rough, just colder, like it had been untouched for a long time. Rex took a quiet step closer, his shoulder nearly brushing Ethan's knee, a low breath leaving his chest, steady and controlled. Not fear, not warning, something else entirely. Ethan paused, his hand hovering just above the floor, listening. At first there was nothing. Then, faintly, almost too faint to trust, a soft tapping sound, irregular but deliberate, like something making contact with wood from below. He froze, every muscle tightening not from panic, but from recognition. It was a sound that did not belong to pipes or wind or settling beams. It carried a rhythm, subtle, but present. Ethan pulled his hand back slowly, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Rex. The dog met his gaze for the briefest moment, and in that glance there was no confusion, only confirmation. Ethan exhaled quietly, shifting his weight as he lowered himself onto one knee beside the bed. The mattress above him dipped slightly with the movement, casting a heavier shadow over the space beneath. He reached for the edge of the bed frame and pulled it back just enough to give himself room. The legs scraped softly against the floor, the sound dragging through the silence like a distant echo. Dust stirred faintly in the air, catching the dim light from the window. He leaned down again, this time bringing his face closer to the ground, his breath steady, controlled, the way it used to be when he had to rely on listening more than seeing. The tapping came again, clearer now, 2 short sounds, then a pause, then one more, not random, not mechanical. Something patterned, something intentional. Ethan's eyes scanned the floor carefully, and that was when he saw it. A slight separation in the carpet near the center beneath the bed, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. The fibers there were worn in a different direction, subtly raised, as if they had been moved more than once. Rex lowered his head beside him, his nose hovering just above that exact spot, his ears angled forward with precise focus. Ethan reached out again, slower this time, pressing his palm flat against the carpet. Beneath it, he felt it, not movement, but a difference, a hollow beneath the surface where there should have been solid ground. He slid his fingers along the edge of the raised section, tracing it carefully until he found a thin line, a seam hidden just enough to escape a casual glance. His heartbeat slowed, not racing, just sharpening, aligning with the quiet tension filling the room. He glanced once more at Rex, who had not moved, had not blinked, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. Ethan pressed his fingers into the seam and applied gentle pressure. The carpet shifted slightly, just enough to reveal the faint outline of a square beneath. Something man-made, something concealed. The air around them felt heavier now, like the room itself was aware of what was being uncovered. Ethan hesitated for only a second, not out of fear, but respect for the unknown space just inches below his hand. Then slowly, carefully, he began to lift. The edge of the hidden panel resisted at first, as if it had not been touched in years. Then slowly, with a faint wooden sigh, it gave way beneath Ethan's fingers, lifting just enough to let a thin line of colder air slip into the room. It carried a scent unlike the stale motel air, something older, cleaner, like stone and time pressed together in silence. Rex shifted closer, his body low but steady, not afraid, not aggressive, simply present, as if this moment had been waiting for him long before they had ever stepped into this place. Ethan raised the panel further, careful not to force it, revealing a narrow square opening beneath the floor. Darkness pooled inside, deeper than the shadows above, but not empty, never empty. He leaned slightly to the side, angling his head to catch what little light reached inside, and that was when he saw it, the faint outline of a ladder, metal, worn, descending into a space below that should not have existed in a roadside motel room. His breath slowed again, not from fear, but from the quiet realization that this had been built with intention, hidden with care. Rex let out a soft breath through his nose, then stepped forward and placed one paw near the edge of the opening, peering down without hesitation, his ears twitching once, catching something Ethan still could not hear clearly. The faint tapping sound returned, softer now, almost like an echo rather than a signal. Ethan rested one hand against the floor, grounding himself, his mind moving through possibilities, none of them simple, none of them ordinary. He reached down and touched the first rung of the ladder. The metal was cool, but not cold enough to suggest neglect. There was a subtle warmth to it, as if the space below held its own quiet temperature, separate from the room above. He hesitated only briefly. Glancing once more at Rex, the dog did not look back this time. His focus remained downward, as if the answer to everything Ethan had been carrying for years waited somewhere, just out of sight. Ethan exhaled slowly, then began to lower himself, one hand on the ladder, one foot searching for the next rung. The wood above creaked faintly as his weight shifted away, the motel room receding behind him inch by inch, the air changing as he descended, growing denser, still, almost protective, like stepping into a place that had not been disturbed in a long time. Rex followed without hesitation, moving with practiced balance, his paws finding each step with quiet precision. The light from above stretched down just enough to reveal rough wooden walls surrounding the narrow shaft, not unfinished, but not meant to be seen either. After what felt longer than it should have been, Ethan's boots touched solid ground, the space below opening slightly around him, not large, but deliberate. He stood still for a moment, letting his eyes adjust, the darkness softening into shapes, into structure, into something real. The tapping had stopped completely now, replaced by a silence that felt less empty and more aware. Rex stepped beside him, his posture easing just slightly, though his attention remained sharp. Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out the small flashlight he carried. The beam flickered once before settling into a steady glow, cutting through the dimness and revealing a small, enclosed room beneath the motel, the walls lined with aged wood, reinforced carefully, as if built to last. A simple shelf stood against one side, holding objects covered in a thin layer of dust. A folded blanket rested neatly in the corner, untouched by time yet. Undisturbed, and in the center of the room, placed with quiet intention, was a small metal box, its surface worn but intact, waiting in the stillness as though it had been left for someone who would understand its presence. Ethan felt something shift inside him, not fear, not curiosity alone, but recognition, the kind that does not come from memory, but from something deeper, something carried. Rex stepped closer to the box, lowering his head, his breathing calm now, no longer searching, no longer warning, as if whatever had called them here had already been found. Ethan moved forward slowly, each step measured, the beam of light steady in his hand, illuminating the box as he approached, and in that quiet space beneath the world above, he understood one simple truth. Some things are not hidden to be forgotten. They are hidden to be found by the right person at the right time. The beam of Ethan's flashlight steadied as it settled over the metal box, its edges softened by years of stillness rather than damage. The surface carried faint scratches that did not look random but earned, like something that had been handled carefully, then left alone on purpose. Rex stood close, his body no longer tense, his tail still, his ears relaxed but attentive, as if whatever signal had drawn him here had completed its message. Ethan crouched slowly, the wooden floor beneath him firm and deliberate. This space had not been thrown together. It had been built with patience, with intent, with time that someone had chosen to spend below the surface of the world. He reached out and placed his hand lightly on the top of the box. The metal felt cool, but not lifeless. There was a quiet weight to it, something grounded, something certain. He paused for a moment, listening again, but the tapping was gone now, replaced by a silence that no longer pressed against him. Instead it held, steady and calm, like the room itself had been waiting for this exact point. Ethan exhaled and gently lifted the lid. The hinges responded with a soft, controlled movement, not rusted, not stuck, just unused for a long time. Inside, the beam of light revealed a neatly arranged interior, not cluttered, not chaotic, but organized with a kind of quiet discipline. The first thing he noticed was a folded piece of paper, placed carefully on top of everything else. Its edges yellowed slightly with age, but not brittle, as if the environment here had protected it, preserved it. Ethan picked it up slowly, his fingers steady, and unfolded it. The handwriting was firm, deliberate, each letter formed with care. The kind of writing that came from someone who understood that words might need to last. He read, in silence, his eyes moving line by line. And as he did, something inside him shifted, not sharply, not suddenly, but like a door opening in a place he had not visited in a long time. The message was simple, not long, but clear. It spoke of someone who had lived above, someone who had built this space not out of fear, but out of the need to leave something behind, something that would not be found by chance, but by someone who listened, really listened. The note did not explain everything. It did not list names or dates in detail, but it carried intention. It carried recognition. It carried the quiet belief that the right person would understand without needing every answer spelled out. Ethan lowered the paper slightly, his gaze lingering on the words as they settled into him. Rex shifted his weight beside him, then slowly lowered himself to the ground, resting his body against the floor with a calm that had not been there before, his eyes no longer searching, just watching, present. Ethan placed the note carefully to the side and looked deeper into the box. Beneath it were a few items, each placed with the same quiet order: a small compass, its glass slightly worn but intact, a set of keys attached to a simple metal ring, and a photograph, black and white, its edges softened by time. Ethan picked up the photograph, holding it closer to the light. It showed a man standing beside a dog, both facing the camera with a kind of stillness that felt familiar. The man's posture carried the same quiet weight Ethan had seen in the mirror for years, and the dog beside him stood with the same alert calm that Rex now carried without effort. Ethan's breath slowed again, not out of tension, but out of something deeper, something closer to understanding. This was not random. This was not forgotten. This had been left with purpose, with care, with the belief that one day, someone like him would stand in this exact place and see what had been waiting all along. The photograph remained in Ethan's hand longer than he expected, his thumb resting along its edge as if the texture itself might reveal something more if he stayed still enough. The man in the image stood beside a simple wooden structure, not unlike the room Ethan now found himself in, though cleaner, newer, touched by the presence of someone who had not yet stepped away from it. The dog at his side stood tall, ears forward, eyes steady, the same quiet awareness that Rex carried without effort. There was no date written on the photograph, no names, just a faint marking in the corner, a number that looked more like a reference than a memory. Ethan lowered the photograph slowly, placing it beside the note, his movements careful, respectful, as though he understood now that this was not just a collection of objects, but a message assembled piece by piece. Rex shifted slightly, his head turning toward the small shelf along the wall, his ears lifting just enough to signal attention, not urgency, just direction. Ethan followed his gaze, rising slowly to his feet, the flashlight beam gliding across the wooden planks until it settled on the shelf. The dust there was thinner, disturbed at some point, though not recently, as if something had been taken or moved long before they arrived. He stepped closer, his boots pressing softly against the floor, the sound muted in the enclosed space. The shelf held a few items, simple things, a folded cloth, a small tin container, and beneath them, another piece of paper, partially hidden. Ethan reached for it, unfolding it with the same steady care. This one was not written in the same style as the first. The handwriting was slightly different, less deliberate, more worn, but still clear enough to read. It spoke of time passing, of waiting, not in frustration, but in patience. It mentioned the room above, how it changed hands, how people came and went without ever noticing what lay beneath their feet, and how that was exactly how it was meant to be. Ethan read each line slowly, the meaning settling into him like a quiet truth rather than a sudden revelation. This place had not been hidden out of fear. It had been hidden out of trust, trust that not everyone would see it. And that was the point. Rex let out a soft breath, then stepped closer to Ethan's side, his posture relaxed now, his purpose fulfilled in a way that did not require further action. Ethan folded the second note and held it loosely in his hand, his gaze drifting back to the center of the room, to the metal box, to the photograph, to the quiet order of everything placed with intention. He felt the weight of it then, not heavy in a physical sense, but in meaning. This was not about what was left behind. It was about why it had been left. The keys in the box caught his attention again, small, ordinary, but not random. He stepped back toward the box and picked them up, the metal cool against his fingers. There was a tag attached, worn but readable, a simple address etched into its surface. Not far from the motel, something within driving distance, something reachable. Ethan turned the keys slightly, the light catching their edges. reflecting a quiet possibility he had not expected to find in a place like this. Rex looked up at him, his gaze steady, calm, as if he already understood what came next. Ethan exhaled slowly, his shoulders easing in a way they had not in a long time, not because he had found answers, but because he had found direction, and sometimes that was enough to begin again. The room seemed quieter after that realization, not empty, but complete, as if it no longer needed to prove anything. Ethan stood there for a moment with the keys resting in his palm, their faint metallic weight grounding him in the present. Rex remained beside him, calm and steady, his earlier tension replaced by a quiet stillness that felt almost like approval. Ethan glanced once more around the hidden space, committing its details to memory, the shelf, the blanket, the careful placement of every object. Nothing here had been left by accident. Everything had been chosen, and now it had been passed forward. He crouched down again and returned the notes to the metal box, placing them exactly as he had found them, not out of obligation, but out of respect. The photograph he held a second longer before setting it back on top, his fingers lingering just enough to acknowledge the connection that did not need explanation. Rex shifted slightly toward the ladder, his posture relaxed but purposeful, as if gently reminding Ethan that there was more beyond this room. Ethan nodded faintly, more to himself than to the dog, then rose and turned toward the narrow opening above. The climb back up felt different, lighter in a way that had nothing to do with physical effort. Each rung brought him closer to the world he had stepped away from only minutes ago, yet something about it no longer felt the same. The motel room greeted him with the same dim light and worn stillness, but it no longer pressed in on him. It simply existed, neutral, waiting. Rex followed him up with quiet ease, stepping onto the floor and immediately glancing once toward the bed, then away, his focus already shifting forward. The panel remained open behind them, the hidden space below now visible, no longer concealed. Ethan stood there for a moment, looking at it, understanding that what had been revealed was not meant to stay hidden again, not in the same way. He moved toward the small table near the window and set the keys down briefly, the faint glow of the streetlight catching their surface, illuminating the etched address just enough to make it feel real, reachable, something he could follow. He picked them up again, turning them once in his hand, then slipped them into his jacket pocket with a quiet sense of decision that did not need to be spoken aloud. Rex walked to the door and paused, his body angled slightly as he looked back at Ethan, not waiting for a command, but offering a silent question. Ethan allowed a small breath to escape him, something close to a smile forming without effort, the kind that came from recognition rather than humor. He reached back and gently lowered the panel into place, not sealing it away, but returning it to its position, the seam once again blending into the floor, subtle, patient, waiting for whatever came next. He grabbed his duffel bag, the familiar weight settling against his shoulder, and walked toward the door, his hand resting briefly on the handle as he looked once more at the room. It had been just another place to sleep when he arrived, just another stop along a road that did not seem to lead anywhere, but now it felt like a point of turning. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet and certain. He opened the door and stepped outside into the cool night air. The world beyond the motel stretched out under a pale sky, the road leading away in both directions, open and waiting. Rex stepped forward first, his pace steady, confident, as if he already knew where they were going. Ethan followed, the keys in his pocket, a small but undeniable reminder that sometimes what you find is not just something left behind, but something that has been waiting for you to move forward. The night air carried a different kind of silence than the room had. It was wider, softer, filled with distant sounds that reminded Ethan the world was still moving beyond the narrow walls he had just left behind. A faint hum of tires somewhere far off, the rustle of wind brushing against dry grass near the roadside. Even the quiet flicker of the motel sign behind him seemed less oppressive now. Rex walked a few steps ahead, his posture relaxed but directed, his nose lifting occasionally as if tracing something unseen but familiar. Ethan followed without rushing, his boots pressing against the gravel with a steady rhythm, the weight of his duffel bag grounding him while the keys in his jacket pocket seemed to pull him forward. At the same time, he reached his truck, An older model with faded paint and a slight dent along the passenger side. Nothing special to anyone else. But to him it had been a place of movement, a way to keep going without needing to explain why. Rex paused by the passenger door, looking up briefly before stepping back, giving Ethan space to open it. The small gesture carried the same quiet understanding it always had, no commands needed. No words exchanged, just a rhythm built over time. Ethan opened the door and set his bag inside, then rested one hand on the roof of the truck for a moment, looking out toward the empty road stretching beyond the dim parking lot. The address on the key tag settled in his mind again. Not far, maybe 20 miles at most, close enough to reach before the night grew too deep, yet far enough to feel like a step into something unknown. Rex jumped into the seat with practiced ease, turning once before settling, his gaze already forward, not questioning, not hesitating. Ethan walked around to the driver's side and slid into the seat, the familiar creak of the worn leather greeting him like an old habit. He placed the keys from his pocket onto the dashboard for a moment, letting them rest in the faint glow of the instrument panel. They did not look like much, just metal shaped into purpose. But something about them carried weight beyond their size. He picked them up again, turning them slowly between his fingers, the engraved address catching the light just enough to remain clear. Something real, something specific, not a vague promise, but a direction. He inserted his truck key into the ignition and paused, his hand resting there as he glanced once toward Rex. The dog met his gaze calmly, his eyes steady, as if to say that whatever came next had already begun the moment Ethan chose to listen. The engine started with a low, familiar rumble, steady and reassuring. Ethan pulled out of the parking lot slowly, the gravel crunching beneath the tires as the motel faded behind them. The road ahead stretched into darkness, illuminated only by the headlights cutting a narrow path forward, the lines on the pavement guiding him without resistance. Without question, mile by mile the world seemed to open again, the tightness he had carried for so long easing not because it was gone, but because it finally had somewhere to go. Rex remained still in the passenger seat, his presence quiet but constant, his ears occasionally shifting to catch the subtle sounds of the night passing around them. After a few miles, Ethan reached out and adjusted the small radio knob, not to fill the silence, but to acknowledge it. A low, distant station crackled. Softly, a voice fading in and out between static, something old, something familiar, the kind of sound that did not demand attention but offered company. The address grew closer with every passing mile, not just a destination, but a continuation of something that had started beneath that bed, something that had been waiting longer than he could measure. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan was not just driving to get away. He was driving towards something that felt like it had been meant for him all along. The road narrowed as Ethan followed the directions etched into the small metal tag, the pavement giving way to a quieter two-lane stretch lined with tall pines that leaned slightly inward, their branches forming a loose canopy that filtered the pale glow of the moon. The headlights of his truck carved a steady path through the darkness, illuminating patches of gravel and the occasional reflective marker that blinked past like distant signals. Rex shifted slightly in his seat, not restless, but attentive, his ears lifting as the environment changed, as if the land itself was beginning to speak in a language only he fully understood. Ethan slowed the truck as the address drew closer, the numbers matching what he had memorized, the road curving gently before opening into a small clearing set back from the main stretch. There was no gate, no sign, just a worn dirt path branching off to the right, subtle enough to miss if you were not looking for it. He turned the wheel and eased the truck onto it, the tires crunching softly over loose gravel and packed earth. The trees here stood farther apart, allowing the night sky to open above them, scattered stars faint but present, the kind of quiet sky that felt older than anything built beneath it. After a short distance, the path widened slightly, revealing a structure ahead, not large, not imposing, but solid, a modest cabin standing alone in the clearing, its silhouette outlined by the faint glow of a single exterior light that still worked despite the years it seemed to have endured. Ethan brought the truck to a slow stop a few yards away, the engine idling quietly as he took in the sight before him. It was not abandoned, not in the way people usually meant. It looked maintained in a way that did not rely on recent presence. but on something more enduring, something that had been built to last beyond constant care. Rex stood up in the passenger seat, placing his front paws lightly against the dashboard as he looked ahead, his posture calm but focused, not alert in the sense of danger, but aware in the sense of recognition. Ethan turned off the engine, the sudden absence of its hum allowing the natural stillness of the clearing to settle in. A soft breeze moved through the trees, carrying with it the scent of pine and earth, clean and grounding. He opened the door and stepped out, the gravel shifting under his boots as he closed it behind him. The air felt cooler here, fresher, like it had not been disturbed by the constant passing of people and noise. Rex jumped down beside him, landing with quiet precision before taking a few steps forward, his movements unhurried, confident, as if he had already accepted this place as part of their path. Ethan walked toward the cabin slowly, each step measured, not out of caution, but out of respect for what he was approaching. The wooden structure came into clearer view, its walls weathered but strong, the windows clean enough to catch the faint light from inside, suggesting that the place was not entirely lifeless. The front door stood closed, simple, solid, with a small porch leading up to it. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the keys, holding them loosely as he approached the steps. The wood creaked softly under his weight as he stepped onto the porch, the sound echoing faintly in the quiet night. Rex remained just behind him, his presence steady, grounding. Ethan paused at the door, looking at the handle, then at the key in his hand. The moment stretched just long enough for him to understand that this was not just about opening a door. It was about stepping into something that had been waiting, not demanding, not forcing, just waiting. He lifted the key, aligning it with the lock, the metal fitting with a precision that left no doubt. And as he turned it, the soft click that followed did not feel like an intrusion. It felt like an invitation. The door opened inward with a soft resistance, the hinges releasing a quiet breath as if the space inside had been holding its silence for years, waiting for that exact moment. Ethan stepped across the threshold slowly, the wooden floor beneath his boots solid and steady, not abandoned, not forgotten, but preserved in a way that felt intentional. The air inside carried a faint warmth, not from heat, but from stillness, from a place that had not been disturbed by noise or haste. Rex moved in beside him without hesitation, his posture calm, his movements measured, as if he recognized the space not as something new, but as something familiar in a way that did not need explanation. Ethan closed the door gently behind them, the sound settling into the room without echo. The interior revealed itself gradually as his eyes adjusted. A simple living area opened before him, a wooden table near the center, two chairs placed neatly as if someone had just stepped away, a small fireplace built into the far wall, clean and used but ready, the kind of readiness that spoke of care rather than neglect. A lantern rested on the table, and beside it, another folded note, placed deliberately where it would be seen. Ethan felt the same quiet shift within him as before, not surprise, not confusion, but recognition. He stepped forward and picked up the note, unfolding it slowly, the paper smooth despite its age, the handwriting different from the ones below the motel, yet carrying the same steady intention. The words were simple, but they carried weight. They spoke of a life lived in quiet choices, of someone who had once stood at a similar crossroads. Someone who had chosen to build rather than drift, to stay rather than disappear. It did not ask anything of Ethan. It did not instruct him. It simply acknowledged him, as if the writer had known that one day, someone would walk through that door carrying the same silence, the same questions, the same need for something more than movement without direction. Ethan lowered the paper slowly, his gaze moving around the room again, seeing it differently now, not as a place left behind, but as a place offered. Rex moved toward the fireplace and settled down nearby, his body relaxed, his breathing steady, the tension that had guided him here now completely gone, replaced by a calm that filled the space without effort. Ethan placed the note back on the table, leaving it exactly where he had found it, then walked slowly through the cabin, each step revealing more of its quiet purpose. A small kitchen area, clean and stocked with simple supplies, a narrow hallway leading to a bedroom where a neatly made bed waited, untouched yet inviting, not in comfort alone, but in the sense of belonging it quietly offered. He paused in the doorway, his hand resting lightly against the frame, and for the first time in a long while, the silence around him did not feel like something to endure. It felt like something to step into, something to accept. He turned back toward the main room, where Rex now lay with his head resting on his paws, eyes half closed, at ease in a way that told Ethan everything he needed to know. He walked over and sat down on the chair beside the table, the wood firm beneath him, grounding him in the present, the keys now resting in front of him, no longer just an object, but a bridge between what had been left behind and what could be built next. Ethan let out a slow breath, his shoulders easing as the weight he had carried for so long settled into something quieter, something lighter, not gone, but no longer directionless. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees, a soft, steady sound that did not demand attention, only presence. And in that moment, Ethan understood something simple and certain. He had not been led here to find what someone else had left. He had been led here to remember that sometimes the path forward begins the moment you choose to stay.